In a hospital ward in the Midwest, a 22-year-old man spent his final hour staring at an empty corner of the room. A corner his mother swears was completely empty, and his father swears was not. His body had gone hollow in a matter of days. Dark bruises, shaped almost like fingers, spread across his neck, his chest, his back. The kind of marks doctors usually associate with restraint, except no one had touched him in weeks. His last words were not to his parents. He looked at the empty corner of the room, and he said quietly, "You came back." Then he screamed once, and he was gone. What happened to Ethan Cole started 2 weeks earlier, in a house his family had owned for 4 generations, a house they were finally ready to sell. Stay until the end, because what his father finally admitted, standing over his son's body, is the reason that house has never been sold to this day. Ethan Cole was 22, home for the summer after his junior year of college, restless in the way young men get when a season stretches out in front of them with nothing but time to fill. He'd grown up comfortable. His family wasn't wealthy exactly, but they owned property, including a sprawling old manor 2 hours outside the city that had belonged to his great-grandfather, sitting empty for as long as Ethan could remember. He'd been dating a girl named Mia for almost a year. Smart, warm, more patient with him than his friends thought he deserved. Mia had one recurring complaint about Ethan, one she'd voiced more times than she could count. He didn't seem to understand where the line was. A hand on her waist in public when she'd asked him not to. Comments to his friends that made her feel like a possession being shown off rather than a person being loved. The week before everything changed, they'd had dinner at a restaurant downtown, and Ethan had draped his arm around her shoulders in front of a table of his friends, ignoring, again, the way she'd tensed and pulled back. "I've told you 100 times I don't like that," Mia said quietly once they were alone. "It's not a big deal, Mia. Stop making everything a big deal. You not listening to me is the big deal, Ethan." The fight ended, as most of their fights did, with Ethan sulking and Mia going quiet. Not broken up, not fine, just stuck in that exhausting middle place. Ethan drove home that night more annoyed with her than with himself, already halfway to convincing himself he'd done nothing wrong. It's a small, ordinary kind of tension, the sort of thing that happens in relationships every day, resolved or not resolved, usually forgotten within a week. It's the reason Ethan's story is so unsettling. Nothing about how it started marked him as someone a nightmare should have found. Nothing except for where he went 2 nights later. That same night, Ethan overheard his parents through his bedroom wall, discussing something he hadn't been told about directly. "We finally have a buyer for the manor," his father, Daniel, said. "A group from the city, ready to close within the month. It'll be more money than we've seen from that place in 50 years. "I still don't like it," his mother, Carol, replied. "Whatever's kept behind those doors, I don't think we should be the ones opening them for someone else." "There's nothing behind the doors, Carol. It's an old house. Go to sleep." Ethan lay awake, turning the word manor over in his head. He'd been there exactly twice as a child, both times briefly, both times with a strange, wordless unease he'd never been able to explain and had mostly forgotten about until that moment. The next morning, he asked his father directly where he was headed with the paperwork, and insisted on coming along, partly out of genuine curiosity, partly, if he was honest, to get out of the house and away from the argument with Mia still hanging over him. His father resisted at first, then relented, on the condition that Ethan touch nothing and ask no questions of the cleaning crew already at work preparing the property for its final walkthrough. The drive took just under 2 hours, through increasingly rural country roads, until the manor came into view. An enormous, aging structure behind a rusted iron gate, its stone walls streaked green with old moss, its windows fogged with decades of dust. It was, even in its decay, unmistakably grand, the kind of house that had clearly once hosted more wealth and more life than the quiet fields around it now suggested. The moment Ethan stepped through the front doors, a faint, sweet fragrance drifted past him. Something floral and strange, unlike anything he could place, as though someone had just walked by close enough to brush against him and breathe. "Something wrong?" his father asked, noticing him pause. "You smell that? Like flowers or something." "Old houses smell like old houses, Ethan. Don't touch anything." As his father went to speak with the cleaning crew, Ethan wandered the ground floor alone and glanced up toward a window on the second floor, where, for just a moment, he was certain he saw the outline of a woman standing perfectly still, watching him. He blinked, and the window was empty. Just a reflection, he told himself. There's no one else here. The gate was locked when we arrived. That evening, back home, Ethan mentioned the manor to two friends, Marcus and Dev, describing it with the exaggerated flair of a good story. The size of the place, the strange emptiness of it, the fact that it would be sold and gone from the family within weeks. We should go check it out properly, Marcus said. One last night in the place before it belongs to some stranger. Come on. When are you ever going to get the chance again? Ethan hesitated only briefly. Mia had texted twice that day, apologizing for the fight, asking if he wanted to talk. And some small, petty part of him, still stinging from being told he was in the wrong, decided one reckless night away with his friends sounded better than one more conversation about boundaries he didn't feel like having. He told his parents he was staying at Marcus's. 2 nights later, the three of them drove out to the manor after dark, slipping through a gap in the old fence line his father didn't know about, bringing along a case of beer and just enough nerve to make the whole thing feel like an adventure instead of a bad idea. The moment Ethan stepped back through those doors, the same sweet fragrance returned. Heavier this time, closer, as though whatever it belonged to had been waiting. They lit a small fire in an old metal bin in the courtyard, drank, laughed, told each other it was the last chance they'd ever get to explore a house like this. It was Ethan who first noticed movement at the top of the long staircase leading up from the main hall. A shape, unmistakably a woman. Her long hair and the trailing edge of a dark dress moving as though caught in a wind that didn't exist anywhere else in the still night air. Guys, someone's up there. All three of them saw her descend the stairs slowly, deliberately, her face obscured by shadow until she reached the bottom step and stepped into the firelight. It was Mia. Ethan's friends would later describe the moment with almost identical language, independently. Relief, confusion, and a strange discomfort they couldn't immediately place watching Mia, who was supposed to be 2 hours away, in a city Ethan had specifically told her he wouldn't be near that weekend. Standing in the entryway of an abandoned manor she had no possible way of knowing existed. Surprise, she said, in a voice that was recognizably hers, and yet somehow slower, softer, carrying an odd, unfamiliar confidence that the real Mia, quiet, careful, endlessly patient, had never once displayed. How did you even... What are you doing here? Ethan asked. I wanted to surprise you, she said, moving closer, her smile calm and unhurried. Tonight is yours. I'm not going to tell you no tonight. Marcus and Dev exchanged an uneasy glance neither of them could explain at the time. Something about her felt wrong in a way that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with instinct. But the fire was warm, the beer had done its work, and Ethan, flattered and relieved after days of tension, chose not to question it. His friends left not long after, at Ethan's insistence, leaving the two of them alone in the manor for the night. Ethan would never speak in detail about what happened after that. But by morning, when Marcus returned to check on him, Ethan was alone, disoriented, and Mia was nowhere in the house, despite there being no way out through the locked gate that Marcus himself confirmed was still chained shut. When Ethan checked his phone that morning, there were no photos from the night before, despite him being certain he'd taken several. His phone showed a call log from Mia at nearly 1 a.m. He hadn't remembered answering it. When he did finally reach the real Mia, hours later, she was confused and hurt. She'd been at her parents' house 2 hours away the entire weekend, exactly as she'd told him, and had no idea what he was talking about. Over the following days, Ethan began finding dark, bruise-like marks spreading across his neck and shoulders. Not the kind of marks from an ordinary night, but deep, deliberate-looking impressions, as though something had gripped him tightly, repeatedly, in his sleep. He also began, according to Marcus, avoiding mirrors entirely without ever fully explaining why. When pressed, he admitted quietly that the first morning after the manor, he'd caught his own reflection in the bathroom mirror, except for one instant. The reflection staring back at him hadn't been his own face at all, but a woman's, gaunt and hollow-eyed, before shifting back to normal the moment he blinked. He grew weaker by the day. He stopped eating properly. He slept most of the day and lay awake most of the night, his color draining, dark circles carving themselves under his eyes. His mother, Carol, noticed first, and eventually convinced his father to bring him to a hospital when the marks on his body multiplied and no explanation from Ethan made any consistent sense. It was only in the hospital, watching his son fade in front of him with no diagnosis any doctor could offer, that Daniel Cole finally told his son, and, in the process, his wife, the truth about the manor that the family had spent 4 generations trying not to speak about. Daniel explained, his voice shaking, that Ethan's great-grandfather had once lived in that manor full-time, decades before it was ever left empty. A man known locally for his obsession with old occult practices, and for a wealth and success that seemed, even to his own family at the time, to arrive too easily to be entirely earned through honest means. According to the story passed down quietly through the family, Ethan's great-grandfather had, at some point, entered into an arrangement with something that had lived in that manor long before he ever bought it. An entity locals only ever referred to obliquely, in the old regional folklore, as a night bride. A spirit bound to a place, taking the form of whichever woman a man most desired, in exchange for devotion, presence, and eventually, everything he had left to give. For years, the arrangement seemed to cost him nothing. Wealth, success. A woman who came to him each night in whatever shape pleased him most. But the longer he stayed, the more his family noticed he seemed to be fading from his own life, until, decades in, he tried to leave the manor for good, to return fully to the family and life he'd neglected. That was when the entity's true nature revealed itself. What had appeared each night as a beautiful, willing companion showed itself, in the light of day, as something else entirely. Something that no longer needed to hide once its claim on him had taken hold. His health deteriorated rapidly. Before his death, in a final, desperate act, he sealed himself inside the manor with the help of an old associate familiar with the same practices, performing whatever ritual was necessary to bind the entity back into the house itself, ensuring it could never leave those walls to follow the family again, so long as no one invited it back out. "You slept there," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "You brought something back with you that isn't going to let go until it's finished." "Finished with what?" Ethan asked, though some part of him, weak and terrified in that hospital bed, already understood the answer. "With you," his father said. "It's already decided you're hers." That night, Ethan's condition worsened rapidly, his breathing growing shallow, the marks across his body darkening further despite every intervention the hospital staff attempted. Nurses would later describe a faint, sweet floral scent drifting through the room at intervals throughout the night. One no one could trace to any flowers, candles, or cleaning products anywhere on the ward. At just past midnight, Ethan's eyes fixed on the corner of the room. His mother, sitting closest, swears the corner was completely empty. His father, standing near the door, has never been willing to say clearly what he saw there. Ethan's lips moved, faint and trembling, forming 3 words his mother heard clearly, though she has spent every day since wishing she hadn't. "You came back." The curtains near the window, which had not been touched by any draft in the sealed hospital room, stirred faintly, as though something had just passed close beside them. Ethan screamed once. A sound his mother has said she will never be able to describe to anyone who wasn't in that room, and then his body went completely still. The doctors pronounced him dead less than a minute later, unable to identify any clear medical cause beyond severe, sudden physical deterioration they could not otherwise explain. The manor at the end of Maple Hollow Road was never sold. The buyers backed out within days of Ethan's death, citing, according to the family's lawyer, an uneasy feeling about the property that no further explanation could shift. It remains in the Cole family's name to this day, gated, untouched, visited by no one. Daniel Cole has said, in the only account he's ever given about that night, that he intends to make sure it is never opened again in his lifetime, and that he has made his surviving family members promise the same, regardless of what the property might one day be worth. Mia, who has never spoken publicly about what happened, is known only to have said, once, to a close friend, that she still sometimes catches a faint, sweet floral smell in rooms where there are no flowers at all, and that when it happens she leaves the room immediately without waiting to find out why. If someone who loved you showed up somewhere they couldn't possibly have known to find you, would you question the surprise, or would you just be glad to see them? Tell us in the comments what you think was really waiting for Ethan at the top of those stairs. And if this story stayed with you, there's another one waiting for you right here. About a family who still receives a single knock on their door every year, on the same night their son disappeared.